In the fall of 1942, deep inside Hitler's headquarters, the German dictator signed one of the most disturbing orders ever issued in modern warfare. An order so brutal, so openly illegal, that even members of his own high command hesitated before carrying it out. Only 12 copies existed. Each one was stamped top secret. And every German officer who received it understood immediately this was not strategy. This was fear. It was called the Commando Order, Hitler's personal command that every British commando captured anywhere on Earth under any circumstance was to be executed on the spot. No trial, no POW rights, no exceptions. Uniform or not, wounded or not, hands raised in surrender or not. If a German officer refused to carry it out, he himself would face court-martial. For the rest of World War II, this order hung like a shadow over Europe. It was so blatantly unlawful that after the war, it sent German generals to the gallows at Nuremberg. But the most shocking fact is this: Hitler did not issue this order for American troops. He did not issue it for Soviet forces. He issued it exclusively for British commandos, because by 1942, these small bands of volunteers had done what no other Allied unit had been able to do. They had made the most powerful military machine in Europe genuinely afraid. The truth is simple. The German High Command respected American industrial power, feared Soviet manpower, but they were flat-out terrified of British commandos. And to understand why, you have to go back to Britain's darkest hour. In June 1940, France had collapsed. The British Army had escaped by the skin of its teeth at Dunkirk, leaving nearly all weapons and vehicles on the beaches. German divisions stood on the shores of Europe from Norway to Spain. Hitler prepared Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. To most of the world, the war looked finished. Britain was supposed to fall next. But Winston Churchill refused to take defeat as an option. He needed a way to strike back, fast, brutally, unpredictably. Not with mass armies Britain didn't have, but with small, lethal warriors who could infiltrate enemy territory, destroy key positions, kill enemy troops, then disappear without a trace. He wanted men who could create, in his own words, a reign of terror down the enemy coast. Lieutenant Colonel Dudley Clark understood exactly what Churchill meant. Years earlier, Clark had studied the Boer Commandos of South Africa, small units of mobile fighters who wreaked havoc on larger British formations using hit-and-run tactics, ambush, and surprise attacks. Clark realized Britain needed its own version. Volunteers from every unit, men who not only could fight behind enemy lines, but actually wanted to. The very name they chose, Commando, was intentional. It whispered danger. It implied irregular warfare, no rules, no predictability. Every commando was a volunteer. You could not be assigned. Men from Scottish Highland regiments, Guards battalions, London desk jobs, anyone who wanted revenge for Dunkirk signed up. But whether they stayed depended on the hell waiting for them in the Scottish Highlands. At Achnacarry Castle, December 1941, the Commando Basic Training Centre became the crucible where Britain forged a new kind of soldier. Men arrived by train at Speen Bridge Station, already winded from the ride. The moment their boots hit the gravel, the first test began. A forced speed march to the castle, 7 miles, full kit, no stops, no mercy. Anyone who fell behind was immediately dismissed back to their unit. And that was only the introduction. Living conditions at Achnacarry were intentionally brutal. Trainees slept in freezing tin huts. They cooked their own food. They cleaned their own rifles. There were no orderlies, no officers' privilege, no safety rails. For 6 weeks, they were broken down and rebuilt under one of the harshest training regimens ever created. Forced marches until men could cover 30 miles with full gear and not stop. Mountain navigation through blizzards and pitch-black nights. Cliff scaling using nothing but rope and calloused fingers. A week of close-quarters killing instruction led by veterans who had used the techniques in real battles. And most notorious of all, live ammunition from the very first day. Machine gun fire cracked over their heads on obstacle courses. Mortars exploded dangerously close. Instructors tossed live grenades during combat drills. Death in training wasn't rare, it was expected. A small cemetery sat within sight of the parade grounds. Every recruit walked past it daily. The message was clear. If you couldn't survive Aknakari, you would never survive behind German lines. Between 1942 and 1946, roughly 25,000 men attempted the training. Only the survivors earned the coveted Green Beret, the mark that made German soldiers whisper the word commando with a mixture of awe and dread. And it wouldn't take long before Germany learned exactly what those Green Berets could do. On March the 4th, 1941, the Commandos launched Operation Claymore, a raid against the Lofoten Islands of Norway, an area crucial to German explosives production. The British stormed ashore, destroyed factories, sank 11 German ships, captured hundreds of prisoners, returned with over 300 Norwegian volunteers, and suffered 0 casualties. 0. German command couldn't believe it. How had an entire garrison been defeated by a small band of raiders who vanished before reinforcements arrived? The shock forced Hitler to divert troops north. But Claymore was just the warm-up. The next raid pushed German nerves to the edge. On December 27, 1941, during Operation Archery, British commandos attacked Vågsøy, Norway. This time, the Germans were ready. They had stationed hardened Gebirgsjäger mountain troops, likely recovering from the savagery of the Eastern Front. These were elite soldiers. Yet the commandos stormed the island anyway. Leading them was Lieutenant Colonel John Durnford Slater, and behind him, one of the most infamous figures in British military history, Mad Jack Churchill. Churchill landed playing bagpipes, wearing a Scottish broadsword and carrying a longbow. While German snipers fired from rooftops, Churchill marched through the smoke and rubble playing March of the Cameron Men, as if daring the Germans to shoot him. The Germans fought ferociously. House-to-house street fighting raged for hours. The commandos adapted, called reinforcements, cleared buildings with grenades, and ultimately annihilated every German position on the island. They destroyed factories, fuel stores, ammunition depots, and retreated before German reinforcements could arrive. The raid was a tactical victory, but its psychological effect was enormous. Hitler concluded the British intended to invade Norway, so he sent more troops, 30,000 more, then more after that. By 1944, Germany had stationed over 400,000 soldiers, an entire army, across Norway, guarding against attacks that would never come. Half a dozen commando raids had removed more German soldiers from the war than the Soviet Union captured at Stalingrad. Germany was losing manpower not to a full invasion, but to the fear of commandos. But nothing terrified Hitler as much as the next operation, an attack so bold, so suicidal, that German officers later admitted they didn't believe human beings were capable of carrying it out. Operation Chariot. The raid on Saint-Nazaire. The port of Saint-Nazaire held the largest dry dock on the Atlantic coast, the only dock capable of servicing the battleship Tirpitz, Germany's Atlantic superweapon. If the Tirpitz ever entered the ocean and sustained damage, this dock was her lifeline. Destroying the dock would trap the Tirpitz in northern waters forever. Britain planned to do just that. The idea was insane. Take an old American destroyer, HMS Campbelltown, disguise it as a German ship, pack its bow with 4.5 tons of explosives, ram it directly into the dock gate, land commandos to destroy the machinery, and then somehow escape. Everyone involved knew the truth. They probably wouldn't be coming home. Just after midnight on March 28, 1942, the raid began. German searchlights caught the incoming flotilla. Campbelltown raised a German flag and transmitted fake signals in German. Suspicion grew. German gunners opened fire. The British tore down the German flag and raised the white ensign. Engines roared. Campbelltown accelerated into a storm of steel and fire. German shells ripped the ship apart. Men were killed at their posts. The deck was painted red with blood. But the ship didn't stop. At 1:34 a.m., Campbelltown crashed into the dock gate so violently her bow buried itself deep into the structure. Commandos jumped ashore amid exploding shells and screaming alarms. The motor launchers behind them were shredded by German fire. Boats burned. Fuel tanks detonated. Men drowned or died trying to reach the shore. Yet those who reached land moved with terrifying precision. Explosives were set, pumping stations blown to pieces, winding houses destroyed, irreplaceable machinery obliterated. When evacuation became impossible, the commandos fought their way through the streets of Saint-Nazaire in running battles, refusing to surrender until they were overrun. 612 men had set out. 228 made it home. 169 were killed. 215 were captured. German casualties were heavy, over 360 dead. But the true destruction came 12 hours later. As German officers and civilians inspected the captured Campbelltown, the delayed charges finally blew. 4.5 tons of high explosives ripped through the port in a cataclysmic blast that killed hundreds instantly. The dry dock, the pride of the Kriegsmarine, was smashed beyond repair for the rest of the war. With that single raid, the Tirpitz was effectively caged forever. 5 Victoria Crosses were awarded. The Germans were humiliated. And Hitler was furious enough to write the commando order. In the order, he accused commandos of murder and criminal behavior, knowing full well that British raids followed the rules of war far more carefully than his own troops. But the truth didn't matter. Perception did. Hitler believed his soldiers feared the mere idea of commandos, that their presence caused panic, disorganization, and collapse. And he was right. The order commanded that any commando captured must be executed, even if in uniform, even if wounded, even if surrendering. The bodies were to be hidden. The Red Cross was never to be informed. Even interrogated prisoners were to be kept alive only 24 hours for questioning, and then executed. Some German officers refused. Erwin Rommel, for example, quietly ignored the order, but many obeyed. Operation Musketoon, 7 commandos captured in Norway, all executed at Sachsenhausen. Operation Freshman, 17 survivors captured in a failed glider attack on a heavy water plant, all executed. Operation Frankton, 10 Royal Marines paddled folding kayaks up the Gironde River. 8 were captured. 6 were immediately executed under the commando order. Even Americans fell victim when working alongside British operations. In Italy, 15 uniformed American OSS soldiers were captured in 1944. General Anton Dostler ordered them shot. He was executed after the war for enforcing Hitler's policy. But despite the horror, the order revealed something huge. Germany feared commando raids more than any other Allied action. The Eastern Front was a slaughterhouse. American firepower shattered German lines in France, but neither of those terrified Hitler into illegal panic. British commandos did, because they broke the German system itself. Germany relied on structure, front lines, divisions, corps, predictable maneuvers. Commandos represented chaos. They struck anywhere: airfields, harbors, power stations, supply networks, without warning. They forced Germany into a defensive crouch. Every coastline became a possible target. Every bridge a potential demolition site. Every night a possible raid. Germany had to garrison thousands of miles of coastline, stretching their resources thin, paralyzing troop movements. And the psychological toll was worse. German soldiers on occupation duty reported sleepless nights, constant tension, and fear of shadows moving along the coast. They respected the way commandos fought: silent, quick, disciplined, deadly. Many German soldiers confessed after the war that they feared commandos more than Soviet partisans or American Rangers, not because commandos were more brutal, but because they were more precise. They struck and vanished, leaving German forces humiliated and exposed. And even when captured under the commando order, British troops behaved with honor. Some gave medical supplies to wounded Germans. Others refused to break under torture. Several German officers later said that executing captured commandos haunted them more than anything else they did in the war. By 1944, British commandos were no longer just raiders. They had become elite assault infantry. On D-Day, they stormed Sword Beach, linked up with airborne troops at Pegasus Bridge, captured key towns, and advanced deeper inland than many larger units. The French commandos of No. 4 Commando liberated the town of Ouistreham, fighting street by street with unmatched ferocity, reclaiming their homeland. And throughout the final year of the war, commandos spearheaded assaults from France to the Netherlands to Germany itself. They trained American Rangers. They inspired modern Special Forces definitions of elite warfare. And they proved something Hitler never wanted his soldiers to believe: that German might was not invincible. In the end, Hitler's commando order achieved nothing but shame. The dry dock at Saint-Nazaire lay in ruins. Norway tied down hundreds of thousands of German troops. Commando raids throughout Europe crippled infrastructure. And after the war, the officers who obeyed his illegal command were executed, while the men who fought honorably, the commandos who risked everything, were celebrated. So why did Germany fear British commandos more than any other Allied unit? Because these men represented everything the Third Reich couldn't overcome: British innovation, British resilience, British refusal to bow, and the terrifying knowledge that small groups of determined fighters could humiliate an empire built on intimidation. A few thousand volunteers, armed with courage, skill, and green berets, forced Hitler, the man who dreamed of ruling Europe, to break international law out of pure fear. And in war, there is no clearer sign of who truly held the moral and psychological high ground. British commandos didn't just win battles. They shattered the myth of German invincibility and proved that even in Britain's darkest hour, a handful of extraordinary men could change the course of the war through sheer will, skill, and audacity the German army never found a way to defeat.